Hello, my name is Jay. Welcome back to my Tech Vault, and today we're going to be checking out the fx-800 3D printer from Frankensbox. And this is a pretty large 3D printer, well, relatively for what you're getting. And this comes in around $300. Now, I wanted to take a video to showcase this simply because I think it's worth noting the fact that this is more geared towards the average end user. This is not really, looking over the specs, looking over it. It's not super, I guess it's super, user-friendly. It's not something you have to do a bunch of tweaking, a bunch of modification, or a bunch of little, configurations every time you want to print something. This is more of something that I definitely see will be the end result of 3D printing, where everyone has something like this in their house. They just push a button and it automatically prints it. Now, for $300, you're not going to get a super big 3D printer. That's some things I'm going to kind of point out already. But in today's video, I want to do a couple things. I want to first off take a look at what we actually get in here, what's coming in the box. Then I also want to do a couple test prints to kind of showcase what it's kind of capable of. I plan on doing a pretty large one. I might 3D print an outline for a fan or something, or maybe even a logo. And then I want to go through and also do a kind of a challenging print. Actually, we're going to use my chemistry model for my general chem class. We're gonna 3D print that because that certainly threw through the things in the university, or through the 3D printers at my university for a loop trying to print some of that stuff. So it's a pretty challenging print. Obviously, it's got its supports and stuff, so we're not like trying to print something impossible, but we can definitely compare the results of what happened there and of course what the resulting product is from this 3D printer as well. Now keep in mind, I think that is the Luzbot Mini is what I printed off my general chem molecule for. So this is going to definitely be something we're putting it up against something that's like upwards of $1,000. I'm interested to see how this shows up. Also, I think this is like more of a household appliance. I definitely think that this looks, definitely fits in the household. So let's take a look at this. Let's unbox this and see what we get. So here's the tray in which it comes with, all the different little, gadgets and parts that it comes with. We get an instruction manual. We'll take a look in that in a second. Looks like we get some type, it's definitely an adapter, some type of SD or USB to micro SD card adapter, which of course is going to be important if you're printing directly from some type of storage medium. Looks like we've got a power cord. This brick actually surprisingly isn't big. Some other 3D printers will actually have the brick integrated to the printer. Other printers will just have like a big kind of power supply popping out of it. So there's a couple different ways that they've ended up going about providing the power to the 3D printer. So that's just a different way of doing it. Nothing wrong with it there. Looks like we get ourselves a USB cable. It looks like a lot of this stuff was kind of just bought, or different parts and pieces from not necessarily made by the company, which honestly I think if it ends up being cheaper, I don't really have an issue with it. So this is a USB 2.0 cable. I don't think there's really a need for a high-speed 3.0 cable if you're transferring small amounts of data. The cable looks fine. We'll get to that in a second. We also get ourselves a roll of red PLA filament, and this is 1.75 millimeters. So that will be something that I guess I'll try test printing with that, because I don't believe I have any I think I have 3 millimeter on me, but I don't think I have 1.75, so I'll have to use that. And then we've got some tools. I don't off the top of my head know what these go towards. I would assume there's some specifics in case you get something jammed or something, you can take things apart. Then you also get what looks like a little keychain, which looks like it also was 3D printed. And if this is any indication of the quality of the print, it looks actually surprisingly pretty good. So we'll have something to compare to, of course, when we actually print something. Sadly, you didn't get any like white PLA filament, you just got the red. Honestly, I think red is a little bit more niche, but honestly, I can't complain. Usually some 3D printers don't even send you that. Oh yeah, and we also get we get a removal tool as well to kind of get that print off as well. All of which actually, well, yes, not necessarily look like they've been made by the company. Definitely look like they are decent at quality, so we'll see how it goes from there. Let's get the printer out. Looks like a scratch on the side of that. Alright, so here is what we are looking at. Honestly, I think it definitely has an interesting look, without a doubt. Honestly, it does look something out of a spaceship. I honestly wish cases even look like this nowadays. I do like the silver and black color scheme, but there are multiple options. You can have a black one. I think there's even a green one. Honestly, with my silver and black case around here, at least for my computer, I kind of like this style. Looks a little bit more industrial. So taking a look off of that, looks pretty good. Surprisingly, I like this one because it's more of a taller 3D printer. It's not necessarily something that's really large, especially when you start getting into the extruders and all the motors that have to go into it. Sometimes they have 3D printers that are rather large, take up a good bit of space. Also, another thing I like about this is it's enclosed. Now, while I don't have kids, I would hope not at my age, I would definitely say that some people that may have some kids don't want, their kids putting their hands in here, messing something up. So I definitely can appreciate the fact that it's all enclosed. Honestly, that also takes a little bit more of the price away, so we're getting a much smaller, and it also takes away a little bit of the space too. So we end up getting a much smaller printing area, which I still, at this kind of size, doesn't seem like a big issue. It definitely does feel like what the Apple iMac Pro was, like a larger trash can style of that. I think it's definitely got an interesting look to it, but it's definitely could arguably look like a spaceship or a trash can, whatever you're kind of feeling for that day. So let's just actually get this plastic out and open it up. So right off the bat, I like the fact that they've gone through and kind of done this faded shading in here. I think that it definitely makes it look a little bit more clean, especially since you have all the extruders and stuff and motors up here. It definitely makes it kind of hide that a little bit without necessarily being an eyesore. I actually can really appreciate that. Got some of this plastic. So a couple things that I can appreciate automatically is just, it definitely looks pretty clean up here. Also, where the filament goes up on the top, we'll showcase in a second. It's just a simple little lock and kind of click mechanism that has perfect spot just to put the filament in there, and then we'll feed it through. Honestly, I like how the fact that it's all relatively enclosed. I got no issues with it. It's actually really nice that it's all, enclosed all together without any issues. The filament's all up there. It's all in one kind of unit. You don't have like some of the other 3D printers like the LesBot Mini or just some of the, I guess, more DIY kind of printers out there. They have a lot more room. They have a lot more openness, and so you have the extruders, the motors, the power supplies. They're all out there open. This is just relatively all enclosed. Honestly, I think this would definitely be where 3D printing will be going in the future. So one of the things I also like to do is take a look at the internals. Now, this may not really decide much, but you can really get a lot and learn a lot from just what they've built inside here. I think that's actually duct tape, so I'm going to have to look into if I actually have to remove that or not. I think it will because it's a heating pad. But I think that just first off, looking at a couple things, looks like this actually feeds the extruder down there. Looks like it's actually cooled adequately. Honestly, I like the fact that it looks like the filament's actually going to go in this tube, so that way it all is really well contained within the box. So it's like you just feed in the filament there. Honestly, some nice metal construction. Looks like we got a tag back here too. Yep, looks like we got a tag of some kind. But it looks like it feeds all in directly through the top up here, where of course you have, right down there. So it looks like it all feeds in where you put your filament. One thing's a little concerned though is I don't know how large prints that you can do, how many, I guess, pounds or whatever, kilograms, whatever you are, from wherever you are. And I don't know like what the size of the filament rolls are. At least I would think that you'd have a rather large one when you're doing a rather large print. And I think that, having a top on there, I mean, it's just kind of constraining what you can actually put in there. I mean, having a certain size, a little disappointing. But then again, I think that the clean look also kind of combats that. So I have set up an IO shield. This has the same one that's printed right here. And instead of doing just the regular IO shield, I had to flip it vertically and add supports into it since it's a smaller printing area, sadly. So that is just going to use more filament, take longer, but that's also something to keep in mind, $300 versus like $1,500 on the LesBot Mini, which is what I printed this on. So let's see how it goes. So here's the review. This 3D printer comes in right around $300. A couple things to point out though that I really did appreciate was the fact that this printing experience was not really a struggle. There wasn't really much of trying to get the, bottom plate balanced. It was pretty easy to set up, and once I plugged up everything together, downloaded the software that it came with, it was really, really easy to print with. Now obviously I could have used Cura or something else to set up in all my models and stuff, but the nice thing was the included software, the software you downloaded, was not that difficult to figure out how to use, and honestly it was really nice. I printed a little engine model, and I think that really it was quite easy compared to at least with the LensBot Mini or some of the other 3D printers that I've used. It was a lot easier because it kind of seems like it's an all-in-one thing. Now obviously with the enclosed case you can get a lot of positives from that as well. There's also some negatives to point out though with that as well. First off, you can't really modify it too much, which definitely for the size and I guess price, something to kind of be keeping in mind. This definitely would be something more for those people that just want like a little home appliance rather than a 3D printer for a larger size. It also leads us on to another thing. The size was a little bit of an issue for me because I want to kind of do a little bit more bigger projects. So it was something to, of course, keep in mind that, instead of rather printing the 3D or this IO shield that I had on actually some of the stuff in my university, instead of placing it, flat, you had to actually place it vertically. So there's some other things to do with the size restrictions. Another thing I want to point out is this printer definitely prints in a lot higher detail, and I really can appreciate the fact that it prints in really high detail. But then again, the drawback with that is it's relatively, well, actually quite slow compared to some of the other 3D printers. And honestly, it's not that bad, but like this whole little engine model, which keep in mind was, a whole bunch of little pieces on top of this little plate right here. It took about 6 hours, 6.5 hours to print. And I think this little IO shield, since of the size restrictions and stuff, took about 2.5 hours. And compared to this IO shield, just because I was printing in a different method and a different way, I guess, this only took like 30 minutes. So comparing it to obviously different printers, LensBot Mini, I believe, on the IO shield, it was just a couple things to point out is that it's relatively slow, and it's something to keep in mind. Now I wouldn't want to see what a really, really big project would do, something that takes up the full size, but I definitely could see that this would be an issue if you wanted to print something, maybe taking full advantage of the space that you have to work with. It might take a day and a half to 2 days, just from what my experience has been. Now, that being said, there's plenty of positives too. First off, as I said, the software is great to use. This is definitely an appliance that I could say is someone with a very beginning level skill set could easily use, easily figure out. The software, as I said, was great, surprisingly great. There was a couple issues, some annoyances on how they've decided to, allow you to scale up things and shrink things down and move things, I guess. But besides that, it is relatively pretty easy to use, and I want to stress that because it was actually surprisingly not difficult. It really didn't take much time at all. As I said, there are a couple things to point out. Since it's enclosed, it's actually really, really quiet, relatively speaking as well. Sometimes, especially on the open 3D printers, you'll have a lot of noise coming out of this. Well, yes, you still have noise, and this actually shook the table a good bit too. My table isn't the sturdiest thing as well, but it was surprisingly quiet for what I'd expect. Now, a couple of things I also want to point out. The little, all-contained module looks really good, actually. Obviously, it's a little bit of a plastic. I don't know how I feel about the plastic, though. It doesn't feel like the most sturdiest thing, but it is a pretty solid module with at least looks like the steel rods and stuff that are in here to allow for the housing for all the motors and stuff. But for the most part, the plastic on the side and everything at least makes it look good. Doesn't necessarily feel the best, but it at least looks good. I do like the fact that they have the, roll of filament on the top here. Obviously, with that though, there's a little bit of a concern of, size restrictions. If you want to get a wider roll of filament, you have a little bit of size restrictions. Obviously, you can just take the top off. I'm not too worried about that. I've actually ordered a couple more things of filament to come in the mail, but for the most part, a little bit concerned with just, larger spools and stuff. You may run into some issues there. That also goes on to the fact of modding it. It's a little difficult to add on parts and stuff, or maybe add on like a hook or something to mount a roll of filament. A couple things I did like though is this bottom panel, or this bottom, the build plate is really, really nice because I can actually, let me just rotate this around real quick. So it's really nice because it just comes out, and it's a little bit of a soft material. And since this isn't like, it's obviously not super soft, but for the most part, it's not like you have a heated bottom plate, so you can actually take this out, and for, when I got this model off, you can just unstick it. And I think this is duct tape or some type of painter's tape. I didn't want to take it off though, since I think this is a review sample, so I'm just kind of being very careful with it. But for the most part, really, really easy to pop it off, which is sometimes an issue as well. And I think the protective little bit of tape there, I really didn't have an issue printing with it, so I don't think there's a problem there. There's some clasps to hold it down, but overall, really quiet. I also like this front design with having the, I guess, faded up kind of look here. It makes it look, hides a lot of the motors, some of the things that are really doing a lot of noise and work. It doesn't make that big of a distraction, and then you just have the little extruder down here that's extruding to print your object. So, as I said, build quality, actually really good. No issues with the build quality. Issues with, of course, it taking longer, which is what you'd expect. Obviously, it's a single extruder, something for that price range, etc. I would definitely recommend this, though, for people that are just starting out. It's rather pretty easy, and honestly, it was a really nice experience to at least print something. It didn't take that long to set up at all. Obviously, you just have the model, throw it in there, you can do a couple tweaks. Really nice to use software. I want to point that out. Whole experience, really nice. A couple features that I actually haven't tested yet, but I will shortly, is the pause stop feature. And I think that's just pretty standard. It stops the model, lets you change some stuff, tweak some stuff, try to fix something if the model is going bad. And I think that's pretty standard. The power on and off feature, I actually didn't want to test because I was doing a couple other tests earlier. But for the most part, everything seems pretty standard. I also want to point out that the USB cable, surprisingly, was really nice. Like this USB cable, I just plugged it into my computer, had the software, and there was not any work at all. Just plugged it in there, hit print, and it started printing. I was able to unplug the USB cable, and it kept on printing. Really appreciated that. Actually kind of felt more like a standard printer nowadays. So that's just a couple things to point out. A lot of features that I definitely really appreciate, but some of the other issues that come with that is, of course, being a closed area. As I said, hard to modify, hard to really do anything with that. Honestly, not too much to modify. I really do appreciate it. Actually ends up working really well, really nice. It did get pretty hot, but since it was kind of enclosed, it kept most of that heat in there. Plus, it's winter around where, at least where I live, so it's not that bad. But that has been a little bit of my testing with this 3D printer. I'm going to be doing a lot more projects with this while I have this. So going on top of the software, one thing I really did appreciate was the auto create the supports, or something that automatically, it was a little button you pushed and it just created all the supports for it. Now, I really could appreciate this because obviously with Cura, there's a bunch of settings. You're going to get a bunch of settings. You can add skirts, etc. But for me, it was really nice because all you did before you printed your model, and I think I was printing this at the time, which I need to redo because it's broken. But for the most part, when you print the model, it was, you have your IO shield, which I had to print vertically. And for when you did this, it wasn't like you had a bunch of complicated things to go through. It was just create the supports. It drew up all the supports, actually, which are all sitting over here. And it created all the supports. It created a little skirt so it wouldn't fall over. And then it just printed the entire thing. Now, obviously with Cura, you do have the ability to add skirts, all this kind of stuff. But I just appreciated the fact that it was a simple button for people that weren't too familiar. Obviously, though, if you're one of those people that needs something a little bit more in depth, then of course you have the option with Cura as well. But with the default software, I didn't run into any issues, so I really could appreciate that, how easy at least it was to go through and print something. So for $300, it's definitely more of a household appliance kind of deal. It's really going for more of something that you wouldn't necessarily have out in the open. It's trying to go for more of a printer style, and by a printer I mean your household paper printer. It's a little appliance that you have plugged into your computer. You just hit print, and it does all the work for you. You don't have this big open machine that makes a lot of noise. It's kind of supposed to be a household appliance, not this big weird looking thing, which honestly I could appreciate. Obviously you lose out on a little bit of working area. You also lose out a little bit on, I guess, some of the ability to change and modify this. But I definitely say this is more aimed at the beginners, which if you're interested, that's something to keep in mind. So thank you guys very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed today's video. As I said, there'll be a couple more projects coming. And then I have to send this thing back. But for the most part, definitely a cool little 3D printer. And I'll be using it just for some more testing soon as well. But thank you guys very much for watching. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.